One evening, Thomas, Percy, Edward, and Mavis were at the harbour yard. It had been a long and busy day. Due to the amount of growing work, they were forced to spend the night and continue the next day. Everyone had felt good about their hard work, but Edward felt sad. "What's the matter, Edward?" asked Thomas. Edward sighed sadly. "I was just thinking about my days back on my old line." Thomas, Percy, and Mavis were very intrigued. "Where was this at?" asked Percy. "It was the Furness Railway," replied Edward. "Me and several of my siblings ran that old line." "How about I tell you a story?" said Edward. "Please tell us," said Percy. "Yes," said Mavis. "We'd like to hear about your previous life back on your old line." So Edward began. "Me and my siblings ran the Furness Railway. There were only 7 of us back then, but we still kept the line in good working order. Although times were hard, we still managed to keep our operations together. I can remember one day sitting in the yard of the main station with my siblings. It had been a hard day and we were all very tired. We were all having a great time talking about the day's work. But little did we know that day would leave a scar in the Furness Railway's history for life." Thomas, Percy, and Mavis listened. "What happened?" asked Percy. "Well, Percy," said Edward sadly, "it started off as a regular day in the yard. But later that day, a dreadful accident would mark the last day on the Furness Railway." Edward paused for a moment. A tear came to his eye. "One of my brothers was shunting a goods train into the yard. When suddenly the brake van derailed, taking some of the trucks with it, and crashing into an oil tower." "What happened?" asked Thomas. "The oil tower came crashing down, and once it hit the ground, there was a big explosion," said Edward sadly. "The explosion rocked the yard. It startled us all." Thomas, Percy, and Mavis were shocked. Once the blast subsided, the yard manager and the crew investigated the scene. "Thankfully, none of my siblings were hurt in the blast, but the incident was so bad that the line had to close. Saying goodbye to my siblings as we were sold off to other railways was the hardest thing I ever had to do in my life." "When I came to Sodor, I somewhat felt okay, but relieved that I would still be in service." Thomas, Percy, and Mavis were sad for their friend. The engines looked towards Edward. He was becoming very emotional. Edward continued. "I was hoping to hear from my other siblings throughout the past few years just to see how things were going with their new lives. But unfortunately, I would never get to hear from them." "What do you mean?" asked Percy. "My driver received a letter from our old controller. It turns out all of my siblings ended up being put out of service and eventually scrapped." Thomas, Percy, and Mavis couldn't believe what they had heard. "How terrible," said Percy. "Absolutely devastating," said Mavis. "I know," said Edward sadly. "I miss my siblings still to this day. I just wish I had the chance to see them one last time." The three engines didn't know what to say. Edward wasn't usually very private about his life, but this was a first. Everyone went silent. They all felt sorry for Edward. Later that day, Edward was just finishing up some shunting in the yard. He chopped out towards the quayside. He stopped just near the loading dock and looked out towards the ocean. The sky was blue and the clouds were white. But Edward was not thinking about that. He was thinking about his brothers. Edward sighed. "It's been so many years since that day," he thought to himself. Thomas pulled up alongside. "I know how you feel," said Thomas. "My brothers are also gone as well." "You're not the only one," said Thomas. "I know," said Edward. "It's happened to all of us engines. The only thing we can do is remember our siblings for who they were and carry on their spirits." Edward knew that Thomas was right. "Remember," said Thomas, "you have us now. We are friends, but we are also family." Edward smiled. Although his siblings were no longer around, he knew that he had family on Sodor too.